ॐ गजाननं भूतगणादिसेवितं कपित्थजम्बूफलसारभक्षितम् उमासुतं शोकविनाशकारणं नमामि विघ्नेश्वरपादपञ्चकम्. Just a sankalpa which I forgot to do. Om mama upatta samastha durita kshayatvara Shri Parameshwara prithiyartham vidya siddhyartham chaham idam pujam karishye. Om sumukhaya namaha. Om ekadantaya namaha. Om kapilaya namaha. Om gajakarnakaya namaha. Om lambodharaya namaha. Om vikataya namaha. Om vignarajaya namaha. Om vinayakaya namaha. Om dhoomaketave namaha. Om ganadhyakshaya namaha. Om phalachandraya namaha. Om gajananaya namaha. Om vaktatundaya namaha. Om shurpakarnaya namaha. Om herambhaya namaha. Om skandapurvajaya namaha. Om Shri Siddhivinayaka Swamine namaha. Om Spatikarajatavarnam Mauktakimakshamalam Amritakalashvidyam Jnanamudram Karagre Dadatamuragakaksham Chandrachudam Trinetram Vidrida Vividabhusham Dakshinamurtamide. Om Namo Bhagavate Dakshinamurtaye Mahyam Shriyam Medam Pragyam Prayachya Swaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Dakshinamurtaye Mahyam Shriyam Medam Pragyam Prayachya Swaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Dakshinamurtaye Mahyam Shriyam Medam Pragyam Prayachya Swaha. Om Omkara Simha Sarvendraya Namaha. Om Omkaro Dhyana Kokilaya Namaha. Om Omkara Nidusukaraje Namaha. Om Omkara Aranya Kunjaraya Namaha. Om Nagaraja Sutajanaye Namaha. Om Nagaraja Nijalayaya Namaha. Om Navamanikya Maladhyaya Namaha. Om Navachandra Shikhamanaye Namaha. Om Nandita Shesha Maunindraya Namaha. Om Nandishadi Madeshikaya Namaha. Om Mohanala Sudhasaraya Namaha. Om Mohambuja Sudhakaraya Namaha. Om Mohandakara Taranaye Namaha. Om Mohotpalanabho Manaye Namaha. Om Bhakta Jnana Shitan Shave Namaha. Om Bhakta Jnana Trinalayaya Namaha. Om Bhakta Amboja Sahasran Shave Namaha. Om Bhakta Keki Ghana Ghanaya Namaha. Om Bhakta Kairavara Kendave Namaha. Om Bhakta Koka Divakaraya Namaha. Om Gajananadi Sampujyaya Namaha. Om Gajacharmo Jwalakritaye Namaha. Om Ganga Dhavala Divyangaya Namaha. Om Ganga Pankila Sajjadaya Namaha. Om Gaganambara Samvitaya Namaha. Om Gaganamukta Murdhajaya Namaha. Om Vadanabdajidabja Shriye Namaha. Om Vadanendus Virdishaya Namaha. Om Varadanaika Nipunaya Namaha. Om Vanaviro Jwalatkaraya Namaha. Om Vanavasa Samullasaya Namaha. Om Vanaviraika Lolupaya Namaha. Om Teja Bhunjikanakaraya Namaha. Om Teja Samapi Bhasakaya Namaha. Om Vineyanam Teja Pradaya Namaha. Om Tejo Mayanijashramaya Namaha. Om Damitananga Sangramaya Namaha. Om Darhasa Jutanganaya Namaha. Om Dayarasa Sudha Sindhave Namaha. Om Daridra Dhanashevadaye Namaha. Om Kshirendu Spatikakaraya Namaha. Om Kshirendu Mukutojwalaya Namaha. ओम क्षीरोपहार रसिकाय नमः। ओम क्षिप्रैश्वर्य फलप्रदाय नमः। ओम नानाभरणमुग्धांगाय नमः। ओम नारी सम्मोहनाकृतये नमः। ओम नागब्रह्मरसास्वादिने नमः। ओम नागभूषणभूषिताय नमः। ओम मूर्तिनिन्दितकन्दर्पाय नमः। ओम मूर्तामूर्तजगत्वपुषे नमः। ओम मूलाज्ञानतमो भानवे नमः। ओम मूर्तिमत्कल्पपादपाय नमः। ओम तरुणादित्यसङ्काशाय नमः। ओम तन्त्रीवादनतत्पराय नमः। ओम तरुमूलैकनिलयाय नमः। ओम तप्तजाम्बूनदप्रभाय नमः। ओम तत्त्वपुस्तोलसत्पाणये नमः। ओम तपनोडुपलोचनाय नमः। ओम यमसंयुताय नमः। ओम यमसन्नुतसत्कीर्तये नमः। ओम यमसंयुताय नमः। ओम यतिरूपधराय मौनिने नमः। ओम यतीन्द्रोपास्य विग्रहाय नमः। ओम मंदारहाररुचिराय नमः। ओम मदनायुतसुन्दराय नमः। ओम मन्दस्मितलसत्वक्त्राय नमः। ओम मधुराधरपल्लवाय नमः। ओम मञ्जीरमञ्जुपादाब्जाय नमः। ओम मणिपट्टोलसत्कटये नमः। ओम हस्ताङ्कुरितचिन्मुद्राय नमः। ओम हठयोगपरोत्तमाय नमः। ओम हंसजप्याक्षमालाढ्याय नमः। ओम हंसेद्वारातुपादुकाय नमः। ओम मेरुशृङ्गतटोल्लासाय नमः। ओम मेघश्याममनोहराय नमः। ओम मेधाङ्कुरालवालाग्र्याय नमः। ओम मेधापक्वफलद्रुमाय नमः। ओम धार्मिकान्तर्गुहावासाय नमः। ओम धर्ममार्गप्रवर्तकाय नमः। ओम धामत्रयनिजारामाय नमः। ओम धर्मोत्तममनोरथाय नमः। ओम प्रबोधोद्गारदीपश्रिये नमः। ओम प्रकाशितजगत्त्रयाय नमः। ओम प्रज्ञाचन्द्रशिलाचन्द्राय नमः। ओम प्रज्ञामणिवराकराय नमः। ओम ज्ञानान्तरभासात्मने नमः। ओम ज्ञातृज्ञादिविदूरगाय नमः। ओम ज्ञानज्ञात्वैतदिव्यांगाय नमः। ओम ज्ञातृज्ञादिकुलागताय नमः। ओम प्रपन्नपारिजाताग्र्याय नमः। ओम प्रणतार्थ्यप्तिवाडवाय नमः। ओम भूतानां प्रमाणभूताय नमः। ओम प्रपञ्चहितकारकाय नमः। ओम यत्तत्त्वमसि संवेद्याय नमः। ओम यक्षगेयात्मवैभवाय नमः। ओम यज्ञादिदेवतामूर्तये नमः। ओम यजमानवपुर्धराय नमः। ओम छत्राधिपतिविश्वेशाय नमः। ओम छत्रसामरसेविताय नमः। ओम छन्दशास्त्रादिनिपुणाय नमः। ओम छलजात्यादिदूरगाय नमः। ओम स्वाभाविकसुखैकात्मने नमः। ओम स्वानुभूतिरसोदधये नमः। ओम स्वाराज्यसम्पदध्यक्षाय नमः। ओम स्वात्माराममहामतये नमः। ओम हाटकाभजटाजूटाय नमः। ओम हासोदस्तारिमण्डलाय नमः। ओम हालाहलोज्ज्वलगलाय नमः। ओम हार्दग्रन्थिविमोचकाय नमः। ओम श्री मेधादक्षिणामूर्तिस्वामिने नमः। ओम श्री दयानंद सद्गुरुवे नमः। ओम श्री महेशानंद सद्गुरवे नमः। So maybe what we should do is to do the dasha mantras, and then I will spend some time just going over the first mantra that we have been doing. So let's just do that. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Gukarastvandhakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Shanno Mitra Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavat Varyama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurrukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaram Avatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yaschandasam Rishabho Vishwarupaha Chandobhyodhyamritaat sambabhuva Samendro Medhaya Aspranotu Amritasya Devadharano Bhuyasam Shariram Me Vicharshanam Jihva Me Madhumattama Karna Abhyam Bhuri Vishruvam Brahmanaf Koshosi Medhaya Pihitaha Shrutam Me Gopaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Aham Vrikshasya Reriva Kirtif Prishtam Gireriva Urdhupavitro Vajiniva Sramitamasmi Dravinagum Savarchasam Sumedha Amritokshitaha Iti Trishankor Vedanuvachanam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Apyayantu mama angani Vakpranaschakshuh Shrotramatho Balamindriyani cha sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Mama Brahma Nirakarot Anirakarnamastu Anirakarnam Me Astu Tadatmani Nirteya Upanishatsu Dharmaha Te Mai Santu Te Mai Santu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vang me manasi pratisthita Mano me vachi pratishthitam. Avir avir maedhi Vedasya maani isthaha Shrutam me ma prahasihi anenaditena ahoratran sandadhami ritam vadishyami satyam vadishyami tanmamavatu tadvaktaramavatu avatu mam avatu vaktaram Om Shanti 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 Bhadram no apivātaya manaha Om Shanti 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 Bhadran karnebhihi shrunuyama devaha Bhadram pashyema akshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangaistuštuvagum sastanubhihi Vyashema devahitan yadayuhu Swasti na indro vriddhishravaha Swasti na pusha vishvavedaha Swasti na starkshyo arishtanemihi Swasti no brihaspatir dadhatu Om Shanti 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 Yo Brahmanam vidadhati purvam Yo vai vedamscha prahinoti tasmai Tamha devamatma buddhi prakasham Mumukshur vai sharanamaham prapadye Om Shanti 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 I will put this away. So we were reviewing the meaning of the Shanno Mitra Shamvarunaha Shanno Bhavat Varyama. I think not sure whether I did the Aryama, but just in case I have done it, I'll just do it quickly. So, Aryama means the one who is responsible for controlling the enemies and obstacles. So it's an interesting thing that the life is that's what makes it really, the word interesting is a good one, because what makes life worthwhile is that there is in fact a process, a struggle to improve. So for instance, if you are, there is no creation if really you are already done what you wanted to do. There is no process, there is no work, nothing to be done. But this is what the whole creation is, that you have to have some agenda, some program, some process to follow. And part of that is, of course, it's a kind of like a battle. So the Bhagavad Gita symbolizes it very well. It's a battle between the good and the bad, and there is a process where you should not succumb to the bad, but to really be dharmic in the way of overcoming the problems and so on. And so here Aryama is that part of you. So I think in all of these prayers that we are doing, both the Sarvatma Bhava and the Atma Bhava, my own understanding, and the understanding of Ishvara are synonymous. They should be looked at. They have a slightly different aspect of it, but really essentially they are the same. So when you say, Shanno Mitra, as we did earlier. So Mitra, as you know, we saw was the controller of the day. In fact, starting with the sun and all the activities that happen with our eyes open. Not with our eyes closed, but with our eyes open, our indriyas are all very active, and so on. So take that as example for a minute. So Mitraha means the external forces that enable me to lead a active life during the day. This is where the life is really led. But then also there is an internal Mitraha. The internal Mitraha, in fact, it is said that it resides on the right eye. And it's both symbolic as well as literal, because with the eyes is where the life begins. And there are exceptions. You can be born blind and you can still, it's not as though eyes are the only sense organs, but really in a very important sense organ which allows you to lead the day life. So anyway, the point is that in all of these prayers, both the Sarvatma Bhava and so the Samashti Bhava as well as the Vyashti Bhava should be kept in mind. And so it's a partnership. I remember Swami Chinmayananda used to say that. He said, there are two wings to a bird that makes it fly. And so both of them need to be employed. One wing is Sarvatma Bhava. And I didn't understand it at that time. All he said was Ishvara and the Jiva both have to strive together. Ishvara is always with us, but we have to do our part. And so, in the Western saying, man proposes, God disposes. So phala and phaladata, that has to be done in complete understanding that both are involved. But here, so the Sarvatma Bhava and the Jivatma Bhava, if you want to say it that way, are involved. So anyway, to summarize, these prayers should be both looked at as externally oriented and internally oriented. So the same thing is true for Aryama. So Aryama means the one who allows the enemies and obstacles to be overcome. And so God has to play a part in that. He has to make sure that there are external forces that are going in the right direction, and be assured that they are. There might be delays, there might be detours, a wrong person be elected and so on, but eventually it is all moving in the right direction. So this is God's doing. Then we have to supplement it with our own internal enemies. And our internal enemies are much more powerful than the external enemies. And we have to keep them under control. And so Aryama is that part of, either call it external or internal, which keeps the enemies and the obstacles. So the difference between enemies and obstacles is that enemies are very willful and with the power of the Atma. So Ravana is a beautiful example of an enemy, because he was a bhakta of Shiva, and with his might he did he created a lot of obstacles. So the obstacles are the creations and the enemies is the creator. So both of them are kept at bay, and it's with a partnership between Ishvara and yourself. So this is the meaning of Aryama. And so here Swami Maheshananji pointed out that the first three, which is Mitraha, Shanno Mitraha, Shan Varunaha, and then Aryama, these three are correspondingly responsible for Jnanam, Jnana Shakti, Ichha Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. So Aryama is Kriya Shakti. You have to do something to keep the things at bay. So Aryama is the responsibility and provides the wherewithal for the Kriya Shakti which is inherent in us. Then the next one is Indraha. So Shanno Mitraha, Sham Varunaha, Shanna Bhavatu Aryama, Shannaha Indraha Brihaspatihi. So Indraha is again both the external and the internal, just looking at the very long explanation of Indraha. So Indraha really just means, very briefly, the power to lead. The power to lead. There is an Hindi word, it says, Andhera Nagari Chaupat Raja. And so what it means is that a section of the society in which there is no leader, there is no Raja. The Raja is just drinking and having fun and doesn't manage the affairs of his kingdom. What kind of a kingdom that will be? It will just go away. It will disappear. It will disintegrate. That's the word I was looking for. It will disintegrate. And so the Raja is very important. And so Indra represents both the external Raja and the internal Raja. Happens in countries also. If the leaders are not really good, then the whole country goes to hell, so to speak. And same thing is true internally. So we have the power to control and to manage our lives. We have it. But we let it not be used. For whatever reasons, so on, it is something that we don't use. So this is called Indraha. So Indraha means here all the control of my senses, doing the right thing, making a progress, thinking correctly, setting my goals correctly, and to have the perseverance to follow through with them, are all through the power of Indraha. So Indraha is known even in the mythology as a person that people fear. Here does it say? Yeah. So he says, Dyava Chidasmai Prithavi Namete. So he says that even Prithavi and Dyuloka, they all do namaskara to Indra. He's the king of the heavens. And so really he is the person who is the most powerful one, the forces that keep everything going well. And internally the same thing. So Indra. Then I think we have ran out of time. Maybe just one more. Brihaspatihi. So Brihaspati is uh, the power to control both Vani, speech, and Buddhi. So Vani and Buddhi are both, he's the person who, again, internally and externally. So I'll give you this one thing. So in fact, I will just spend a couple of minutes talking about so Ritam vadishyami, Satyam vadishyami. So what is the difference between Ritam and Satyam? So Ritam is learning what is the right thing to do from the Shastra, and can only be done from the Shastra, because all other sources, unless it is done under the management of someone that knows Shastra very well, then it is incomplete. Like, for example, supposing your parents, just as an example, supposing your parents are very good people. No one is totally good, no one is totally bad, but they are, generally speaking, can be classified as one who are wise or one who are unwise. So the parents could be wise. But if the parents have not studied the Shastra, they cannot be your ultimate gurus. So the only a person who has followed the Shastra is the one who can tell you what to do, what is the truth. So this is called Ritam. So Ritam means learning what the Shastra is saying. Why should I speak truth? What is the reason for it? What is in it for me? Is called Ritam. Satyam is the follow through. If you would, just extending it, Ritam is theory and Satyam is the practical use of the theory, if you want to look at it that way. Ritam vadishyami, Satyam vadishyami. And so Brihaspatihi, so this is where Vani comes in. The way we talk, the way we express. So Vani means all the expressions of our life, as well as the Jnanam, Buddhi. So the person who is the Mahadevata for that is Brihaspati. So my namaskara to Brihaspati again, to saying, may you help me invoke those powers in me. Really what it comes down to is that the external ones are always there. The internal ones have to make consistent with it. That's when both the wings fly together. And so the Brihaspati, there is an internal Brihaspati. And the internal Brihaspati is the one that follows the Ritam and then does the Satyam. Anyway, those are the explanations of this very beautiful, very powerful mantra. Shanno mitra sham varunaha, shanno bhavat varyama, etc., etc. Okay. So, we are now approaching the end of the Karika. A few more weeks to go, making good, slow but steady progress. And hope you're, I'm certainly learning a lot in careful review of the details of Gaudapadacharyaji's instructions, and I hope you are too. So that brings me to a point that this is the issue that we have with these online classes, that you don't have this direct two-way contact with people. I remember Swami Dayanandji, when, as you know, many of you have always met him, and when he first starts the class, he spends a fair amount of time looking around and making eye contact. And even if people are not looking at him, he just sees who's there. And this is his way of personal contact with people. And to a certain extent, I followed that when we were teaching classes, although I don't follow it as much as Swamiji used to do. He would just spend a couple of minutes not saying anything. And I'm the type that I see people, but then I start teaching right away. But now I'm not able to do that. The reason I'm mentioning all this is that slowly I feel I'm getting out of touch with you. At least in the classes when there were less number of people, at least we would stop by and say hello and how are things, and we're not able to do that. So the reason I'm mentioning all this, I would very much like you to drop me a line just telling me about how you're doing, how's your family, and that maintains a certain contact between us. So I very much appreciate to do that. I just got a wonderful email from a lady in Germany, Anita, who's attending the Drikdrishya Viveka. I just got it this morning. And, she said, I just want you to know that I am watching your classes. I may not speak, I may not be able to attend it live, but here's how my life is changing. I'm doing yoga, and your Drikdrishya Viveka is really helping me shape my life, and I appreciate it, and I'm feeling very happy about my life. It was a good thing. It's not as an ego booster or anything, but it just means that the teaching is doing what it is supposed to do. It was a good fun confirmation. I was thinking, I don't get that from many of you. It's not as though you are not watching and so on. You are, but I don't have that kind of a feedback, which we had the occasion to do so. So you don't have to do that right away or anything, but I would very much like to get some kind of otherwise I'll have to write to you and invoke your actions and so on. So anyway, I thought I'd mention that. All right, so with that, let us begin let's continue our study of the Karika. I've changed the setup a little bit here. The lighting is different and so on. So I'll talk about that later on. Let's go on with the class. So, where were we? There's a page that I'm looking for where I had made some notes to begin the class. It's not here. What I did with it. Anyway, we will start. So, So in verses 75 through 79, Gaudapada, Bhagavan Gaudapada Ji, important person in the whole lineage, talks about the benefit for a person who has received and assimilated the teaching presented in these verses. So, the nature of mithya needs to be assimilated. So, assimilated means that we're not accustomed to seeing something that looks so real, but it isn't. This is the issue. You're not accustomed to seeing that. And so, but that is the truth. If we want to follow the truth, it's interesting, it should be looked at in the meditations and my own life's thinking, because I'm in the similar boat as you are. It's not as though I am Jivan Mukta yet. I'm on my way, but not yet. So the issues that I have are very similar, which is, if you step back and look at it this way, our life's experiences and training, not only in this life, but really extending much, much beyond that, before this, is to deal with things that are embodied. I just want to make this point. We are accustomed to dealing with things that are embodied. This is another way of explaining, we say that Atma cannot be seen, it is not an object. Those words become kind of often used, and we look at it and says, yeah, I've studied that, let's go on to the next point. But they don't. It's interesting, one other thing I would say is that I'm just giving you some general things. In a way, the making progress towards complete freedom in life is in a way like climbing a slippery mountain. I mean, in some ways it is not the right thing to do, because to say it is not the right thing to say it this way, because Vedanta says, Swami Dayananji also says, there is nothing to be done, but there is something to be known. True, that I don't disagree, that is absolutely true. There is nothing to be done, but there is something to be known. However, if you're looking at a full understanding of what's going on and not being able to get the benefit of it. So this is what it is saying here in verses number 75 through 79, as we will go in a minute. It talks about how to really get the phalam of the vidya. So many of the questions that you have, Virendra Singh's questions and so on, what do I have to do? All have to do with this fact, is that in a way I am inside climbing a steep hill, even though I'm not supposed to say do it something or something, but in a way it is like that. I feel that way. Why? Because what happens is that the truth of what we are learning is the peak of the mountain. And I'm not able to reach it exactly as I want to. And why? Because it's kind of like two steps forward, one step back. I keep slipping. And I would say the way to really stop the slipping is to hang on to things that really mean something. They are pointers in our life where I can grab onto it. Because if I don't grab onto it, then I slip down. So these are kind of like hooks that just all the mountain climbers, they do the same thing. They very carefully put the hooks in the crevices of the mountain and then they lift themselves up. So in a way it is something like that. One of those hooks, this is the reason I'm pointing out, is that we are accustomed to dealing with each other as embodied people. I am accustomed to looking at the world as embodied. Embodied means one that has a presence as an object, as a thing. It has some shape, it has some, if it is live, then people are talking. If it is not live, then it is just sitting there. But either way, it is a thing. And I get into a habit of dealing with the embodied world, with the embodied myself. All my dealings in life are with, you can ask, you can say, then what else am I supposed to do? There's a telephone call, there's food, there's work, there's problems, there's health, and so all these are embodied things. What do you want me to do? This is what I'm used to. Yes, we know, I know. You're supposed to deal with it that way. But as you're dealing with it, do not forget that your truth is not embodied. The truth of yourself is not embodied. In the very first verse of Dakshinamurti Stotram, this is made clear that it is. Swami Maheshananji gave, if those of you that attended that class, Swami Maheshananji gave a title to verse number 1, which was Atma Pratyak Swarupa. If you remember that, Pratyak Rupa. Rupa is just a word, shape. Pratyak Rupa means that it is non-embodied. You'll never see yourself as an embodied person. And if you are seeing yourself as an embodied person, which we are, then that is not the truth. You have to go beyond that. If you want to be the Sakshi, Sakshi is not embodied. So in a way, what we have to do is that our entire flow of thinking, this is the old language, as we were discussing last week when I gave an answer to the question. The old language is that of the embodied things. And we have to go on. It's not as though you suddenly shut your eyes and people are saying, hey, I'm talking to you, and he says, I'm not embodied. No, I'm not saying that. But in and through all of that, you have to say that I am really living a dreamlike world. This is not reality yet. And so you have to be very patient. You have to be very patient. And so to see yourself as unembodied is what we have. This is the new language that we have to see. with all of its implications. It's not a simple thing. I remember one of the students in the class about a year back when we were still in Milpitas was saying that Sakshi, I should be the Sakshi. It's not as simple as that. Of course I am the Sakshi, but what are the implications of being a Sakshi? Do we understand that the Sakshi means, so the Sakshi means that I am the witness. Well, that's pretty obvious. It doesn't require a lot of classes to see, hey, you're the witness of things. Sure, okay, we can grasp that easily. But so what? How does that change my life? So the way that should be done is to change the language of the vasana structure has to change. Where first I have to understand the implications of the unembodied. And what that would mean is, can unembodied ever be born? I have to think about that. Can the unembodied have any kind of a relationship with the bodied? And so this is where we have to really understand what the Shastra is saying. Understand it. Not just follow it and repeat it, but to really saying, hey, you cannot, asangoham ayam atma. It is impossible for the mirror to have any kind of a relationship with an image that is projected on it. Impossible. But what happens is that my old vasanas, which is all have to do with embodied self, relationships, and being born, and all of that comes into play. And I'm not really, I'm not used to thinking in terms of the unembodied, with all of its implications. The fact that I cannot be touched by dukkha, any problems, asangoham, that I cannot be touched by death. I'm independent of time. So all those are implications that I have to fully get acquainted with first. Have I done all of that? No, but why can't I just simply, this is the truth. You look at all of the advanced literature, they all say, my dear, just understand, just knowing what the new language is just the beginning. As we were talking about learning a brand new language, you first just see how to even write it and what is the pronunciation, each letter. Then you have to put it together. And then after a while, it becomes second nature to you. Until it becomes a second nature, the phalam of the vidya will not be there. So the old vasanas have to be replaced by brand new vasanas. So anyway, so these verses are really pointing this out in different ways. This is a very advanced text with some very beautifully constructed arguments, examples, implications, results, and it needs to be studied again and again. But I think that the fundamental thing that I'm feeling for myself is that I have to think of myself repeatedly as an unembodied person. And my mind is not, so this is what is called, this is called the Brahmakara Vritti. Brahmakara Vritti. And it requires a process. And so in the Dakshinamurti Stotram, the very last one, Tenasya Shravanat Tadarthamananat. What is it? How does it go? Tenasya Mananat Arthamananat Dhyanatsa Sankirtanat. And in the there's a very famous verse, which I am not sure whether the Panchadashi was originated there. Sometimes I am not sure of that, because Swami Vidyaranya has been very good at assembling all of the issues in a given book. So whether he put his own thoughts into it or he borrowed it from Bhagavad Gita and so on, sometimes it's not clear to me at least. So there is a very famous verse in the 13th chapter which says, Tat Chintanam, Tat Kathanam, Anyonyam cha Tat Chintanam, Tat Kathanam, Anyonyam, something to the other. And etad ekaparatvam cha brahma abhyasam viduhu buddhaha. So he says, this is what it means, is that I have to think about it. I have to talk about it to myself and to the others. In order for this, just like learning a new language. How do you learn a new language? You can either do it without learning the alphabet, or you can do it with the alphabet. But regardless, there is a process involved in learning the new language. And the thinking is a language. I think in terms of a way of thinking. Oh, I have to go there. That means, just imagine the implication of that. I have to go there means embodied. That means this body has to go there. Has nothing to do with the Atma. The Atma is sarvavyapakaha. There is no place that it cannot be. It cannot go anywhere. Akasha, can the sky go someplace? So the unembodied has its own language, its own implications. This is what we have to do through these advanced texts and so on and so forth. And so, anyway, so here Swami Paramarthananda was very good in pointing out that there are 4 points that we should be thoroughly familiar with and assimilated. And those are, we were talking about mithya, the fact that I am not accustomed to seeing the implications of the non-embodied, as I pointed out. But anyway, what it means is that the mithya has 4 aspects to it, which should be very clear to me, because I need to dissect the problem as to where am I making the mistake. And there are 4 aspects of that. So we've studied all this. So one is, mithya does not have an origination. Mithya does not have existence. One is no origination. Number 2 is no existence. Number 3, it has an appearance. And number 4, the appearance is due to ignorance or maya. These are the 4 things that I have to think about. And then I have to now understand that being the case, what are the four things being the case? No origination, no existence, but it does have an appearance, and the appearance is due to ignorance. Those are the 4 points. Now we have to go further and understand very clearly that any entity which can be classified under this segment, which is a mithya, must be based on an adhisthana. Must be based on an adhisthana. You cannot have an appearance without a basis. Cannot have that. And so even though, so in some ways, the thinking about the mithya, these 4 points, when you're looking at the world, your experiences and so on, you are constantly reminding yourself that they fulfill these 4 conditions. This is where they belong. This is the segment which, if you want to segment your life, then the entire set of experiences should be segmented as anatma, drishya, in one of these 4 segments, in one of these 4 conditions. That is the segment. Then the next thing is, looking at mithya in this way must constantly lead you to the fact that mithya cannot exist by itself. It has to be based on some adhisthana, some basis. So the very famous rope and snake. Cannot see snake without a rope. Cannot see it. And so this really is an important thing, because as we saw in the meditation that we did, I think it was a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago, must have been a week ago, about the linga sharira. So the thing is that the appearance of the world, this is all part of teaching. This is all part of the hooks that I have to climb up on. That the teaching says that the appearance of the universe, which is mithya, cannot be without satyam, which is you. So the unembodied, which I have very hard time following, it should be seen that the entire set of my experiences point out to the fact that I am the Satyam. It cannot be without my Satyam. And Satyam also, so these are all various hooks that I should be very clear about. We just say I am the Satyam and so on and so forth. But what does it mean I am the Satyam? The definition of Satyam, Sat, should be very clear. That I am the very nature of existence. Which means never absent. Never absent. It is not existent, but existence. The very nature of existence, the very truth of what existence means. This is what Satyam is. This has to be clear, the very definition. So in the definition of Satyam, Mithya and Asatyam, Asatyam is one which is, or Tucham they say, Tucham and Asatyam, one which never is, like a square circle, never, not possible. And Mithya which sometimes is not. Satyam is, it never is not. And so when I look at, so this is what I have, this is the new language, is that when I'm looking at the world around me, then I'm not lost in finding what is the truth of the world. Where is it all leading? You know, is the thing. These days we've had some extraordinary problems. The COVID problem is there. And if you are in US, then you have some, issues with the governance and politics. If you're in India, you have this problem with China and Pakistan ready to pounce on you and your economy. So these are things that you have to deal with. And I'm very used to, our mind gets very used to dealing with all of those kind of things. So this is really not dealing with Satyam. So Satyam would mean that in and through all of that, you are still there. How can that be? Well, this is what we have to think about. So Adhyaropa, Apavada, all those kinds of things we have to see. So really what I'm saying is this. So this is I would say is the crux of it. So two things. One is I have to learn the language of being unembodied. And the second one is that my experiences should point out to the fact that I am the Adhisthana for the whole world. I am the Satyam of the whole world. Adhisthana means what? Adhisthana means which is constant and unaffected by all the karya, all the effects. Unaffected. So Adhisthana for all the ornaments is gold. So the quality of gold or the quality of a clay for the pots is that it doesn't matter. It's always there. It's just that you don't think about it. So therefore, my way of experiencing life, is of course to deal with it as much as necessary. So it doesn't mean that I'm not involved with the politics, therefore I'm not going to vote. No, you have to, as a Vyavaharika Sat, you have to vote. You have to educate yourself, to express yourself. All of that is there. But that is all temporary and not eventually helpful. What is not temporary, what is eventually helpful, is that while you are experiencing things, your mind should see that these experiences are based on me. One which is not the experiencer, but it is the Adhisthana, the very basis of all of these experiences. This is what I have to see. And that adhisthana is satyam, jnanam, anantam. Are we prepared to do that? You have to ask yourself. And if the answer is no, why not? Well, I'm not sure if that is the truth. Okay, that's another thing. If you're not sure that is the truth, then please find out what the truth is. You'll come back to the same thing after you're looking at all the other kinds of interpretations of truth. This is the truth. But then how come I don't see it? You know, my Guru Swami Dayananji, when people would ask him the same question, how come I don't see it? He'll say, that is not your question, that is my question. How come you don't see it? He says, very obvious to me. Why isn't it obvious to you? You should ask yourself. So this is what we have to do, is that there is a process involved where I fall down from the steep hill because I don't have the hooks to understand. And these are the kind of hooks that I need to understand. That the language of the embodied is completely different, and the language of the unembodied is completely different, and that every mithya has a adhisthana. If you are really sincere about looking at the world, you cannot see it as a mithya until you see the adhisthana. Beautiful. Very important thing. So the definition of mithya, otherwise your mind will constantly say, this is, what kind of a mithya are you talking about? I don't see it as a mithya. You'll only see that as a mithya if you see the satyam, which is at a higher level. So the role of a play is only a role if you know your truth outside the play. I remember this, it reminds me of what time we have. Oh my gosh, it's 9:11. Oh, I haven't even started on all the verses that I was going to do, quite a few verses today. It reminds me of Swami Dayananji once said that suppose there was an interplanetary travel. So there's a person, from heavens or some other loka. This is Manusya loka. Prithvi, our earth is the human loka, the humans and animals. But supposing there was another loka where, and this is theoretically possible, where the people were all jnanis, they were all wise people who knew exactly what is going on. That this is just mithya, this is that Atma is the Satyam. They all knew that. So a bunch of them went into a spaceship and visited the earth. And when they visited and they started talking to people and so on, so the people back in their old loka were saying, how are the people there? Tell us about it. Like when Swami Dayananji first came to the US from India, he said, the moment I got back, people were very curious. What is America like? We've heard of that in newspapers and so on, but what is it really? It's exactly like that. This person came in and he started interacting with the Bhuloka, our loka, and they were people who were doing communication. He says, tell us about what the people are like. He says, oh my God, This is a mad world. He says, I cannot believe how people are living. So he says, why, what's happening? He says, can you imagine a play? Imagine people acting in a play where they don't know who they really are. They don't know that they're playing a role, and they don't know what the script is. He says, can you imagine something like that? So the people in that loka said, no, we cannot imagine. How will it be? He says, that's exactly what it is. He says, what I find is that the whole world of this so-called embodied world is moving around like mad people, not knowing what the script is, not knowing what their original nature is, that what they're doing is really just a role. They don't know that. So when somebody dies, you cry a lot and you get fearful of your own death. Not knowing that no one is dying, it is just rebirthing yourself. That's it, but don't know it. So everything looks very, if there is a leader of the country who's misbehaving, you feel terrible. It's not like a script in the play where a bad person becomes the leader. It's a very interesting thing. It can happen in a play. The Ravanas are born, and just as a play. And they don't know it. So everything is taken to be very real. He says, don't visit this place. People are crazy, and if you stay with them for a while, you will also become crazy. He says, I've had it. Please, I'm going back to my old, where everybody they have a certain role, but they know exactly who they are. They know what the script is. And then there's laughter everywhere, there is smiles everywhere. And even if there is some kind of a dukkha, it is just make-believe dukkha. Kind of like, you've heard of people acting in movies where they cannot cry. So the directors and producers say, well, keep an onion close by, close to your pocket. And when you have to cry, just cut it a little bit. And you'll see, that's a good idea. So that crying is a feigned cry. Or like, sometimes when we have to admonish the young kids, you don't really get angry, but you have to feign anger and say, next time you do this, I'm telling you, I'm going to lock you up. Don't ever. So they all wink at each other and say, did I do a good job? This is the way the embodied life should be, but it isn't. How did I get into this soapbox opera of talking about all this even without going into verses? Anyway, it's too late to go back to it, so we will continue to follow verses number 75 through 79, and that's the way it is. This is what you get. And we will continue, we'll see. How do we do that? Om Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahishaha Guru Brahmanebhyah Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samastha Sukhino Bhavantu Kale Varshatu Parjanyah Prithvi Sasya Shalini Desho Yam Kshobarahitaha Brahmana Santu Nirbhayaha Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् असतो मा सत्कमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतं गमय ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ Well, I'm not sure with a class like that you would have a lot of questions because it was really more of a general exposition rather than new concepts per se, but I suppose there were some new concepts, so I'm not so sure. Let's see. Comments from both Srinivas and Suvarna about should we have a Zoom and how about a Google Meet. I think that what we could do is to perhaps do a video two-way once in a while. I think in general the classes are doing okay because most of the time I'm the one that has to talk and there are some questions at the end that we can deal with. And I think that, by the way, I will just continue to remind you that if you do have a question, do send an email to me, and I spend much more time in replying to emails, and that should continue on. So if that hinders you from asking questions, please use the email. But I think in terms of a Zoom or as Suvarna said, to use Google Meet, we could do that perhaps occasionally, but not as a regular one. I think that I am really persuaded by Raj and Chandra that this is the right medium where I'm able to see your questions, and so perhaps we can have a satsang session once in a while where we can spend more time on a Zoom. So we'll think about that, but I think it's going okay. All I'm saying is that I would very much like to see some of you sometimes write about yourself to me. To me, that's more important, more than even a Zoom. And that also will be a one-on-one. So you're not really talking to everyone, but you're just telling me about yourself and how are things going. And I would really welcome that if you could please do so. Chala Joshi also says that too much disturbance. I think that Swami Paramatmananda has used it, and there are a lot of issues with that. And I get into some Zoom things on the family, and it's not easy. It's not, so I'm not so sure about it. But anyway, so what I would very much like to do is to just keep me abreast, because I do think about you. How are you? How are things going? And so if you can give me some feedback through emails, not as often as unoften as you like, doesn't matter. But in just looking at the email from Anita, it felt very good that we are connected, and especially if you're not attending these things live, if you're just watching it. So I don't even, at least when you are attending and I know you are involved, but if you're not attending live, then it may be even more useful for me to get some feedback on how you're doing. Okay? So with that, yeah, so I think I don't know how much time, because obviously I'm going offline and talking about other things at the same time, but hopefully we'll wrap this Karika chapter 4 up in a few weeks, and then, as I promised, we will go back to a review of the Upanishad itself, and then go to, I think we've all agreed that we are going to do Brahma Sutra, but the way to teach Brahma Sutra I am not yet sure of. I've listened to one class by Swami Paramarthananda, and I found that conditions are quite different. The students there are a different level than the one we have, and so I have to look at the applicability to us. Anyway, we'll think about that. I'm still haven't given up the idea of doing Brahma Sutra, but I'm not 100% sure. So time will tell me exactly what to do next as we go forward. So with that, let me close the class. Namaste to all of you. Om